Carl Jung once wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But fate doesn't shape you, you shape into it. And the shaping begins not with gaining, but with shedding, not with doing, but with dissolving. Before the new version of your life can appear, the old version of you must be revealed, tested, undone. Change does not arrive politely. It doesn't knock, it dismantles. The life you asked for does not stroll into your world, wrapped in calm and clarity. It breaks through in chaos, in silence, in unbearable stillness. The transformation you begged for was never denied. It was delayed until you became someone capable of receiving it without collapsing under its weight. The universe is not transactional, it's initiatory. It doesn't check your resume, it checks your resonance. And before it shifts your external reality, it asks only one question. Have you become the one who can hold what you want without being destroyed by it? This journey isn't about reaching something new. It's about removing everything false that blocks what has always been yours. 1. The illusion of readiness. Most people mistake urgency for preparedness. They confuse discomfort with divine timing, desperation with destiny. But the universe is never rushed. It doesn't respond to please. It responds to alignment. Not the kind built on vision boards and repeated affirmations, but the kind forged in solitude, surrender, and inner coherence. The illusion of readiness is seductive. It tells you that wanting is enough. It convinces you that reading the book, attending the seminar, meditating for 15 minutes a day will somehow prove you're ready for the quantum leap you crave. But wanting something and embodying its arrival are two entirely different things. The universe, as Jung implied, operates through the unconscious far more than we care to admit. And the unconscious can sense when you're asking for more than you're willing to become. So it waits. It withholds. It watches not with judgment, but with surgical precision, measuring not your odds, but your vibration. Real readiness isn't loud. It's not broadcasted. It's recognized by the way you move when no one's clapping. It's encoded in your smallest decisions, what you say yes to, what you release without needing closure, what you choose when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. And until your internal architecture reflects the frequency of what you're asking for, life will mirror the delay, not as punishment, but as protection. Because giving you what you've requested while you're still fragmented would be cruelty disguised as reward. Here lies the paradox. You become ready only when you stop needing what you asked for to prove your worth. Readiness blooms when you no longer chase change, but radiate the very frequency of its inevitability. And so the universe tests, not to humiliate, but to refine. It sends silence instead of signs. It dismantles the false stability you built around your wounds. It delays the blessing not because it's cruel, but because it's sacred. You are not being held back by fate. You are being held in place by your last unresolved version of yourself. True readiness is not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage that moves anyway. It's not about proving yourself to the world, it's about proving to the sacred that you are no longer negotiating with your truth. This chapter doesn't end with a checklist, it ends with a mirror. Look at who you are when nothing works, when no doors open, when every step forward feels like quicksand, because how you show up then, that's your true level of readiness. 2. Chaos as curriculum. There is a moment before every transformation when everything falls apart. Not gradually, violently. It's as if the scaffolding that once held your life together is yanked away, leaving you exposed, uncertain, suspended. In that moment, you do not feel reborn. You feel abandoned. But the truth is, the collapse is the classroom. Before the new emerges, the old must be shattered, not softly set aside. And that breaking isn't punishment, it's precision. A sacred die-assembly. Because the life you're asking for can't be built on foundations created by fear, conformity, and false identity. We call it bad luck. We say, "Why is this happening to me?" But the deeper question, the honest one, is, what was I refusing to release that life had to rip it from my grip? Chaos is not destruction, it's demolition with purpose. When relationships fall apart, when opportunities disappear, when motivation vanishes, you are not being pushed backward, you are being pulled inward. Everything is being unlearned. Everything that once defined you is now being examined by the very forces that love you enough to not let you stay unchanged. And here's the hardest part to accept. It all feels personal, but it's not. The universe doesn't act out of malice or fairness. It acts out of energetic law. The same way a fire burns both paper and poison without moral preference, the collapse burns away what no longer resonates with who you're becoming. Carl Jung understood that the shadow must be confronted, not to be punished, but to be integrated. In chaos, your shadow surfaces. It shows you your dependency, your avoidance, your addiction to certainty. It invites you to face the fact that you constructed your identity around survival, not truth. This is a classroom where emotional sovereignty is forged. When there's no clarity, no affirmation, no comfort, will you still choose to respond with integrity? Because transformation isn't about what you manifest when things go your way. It's about what you transmute when nothing does. The chaos doesn't delay your evolution. It is your evolution, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. 3. When the ego fights the soul. The ego is not your enemy, but it is the part of you that fears death. Not physical death, but the death of identity, comfort, predictability. It clings to structures even when they've long expired, because it was built in response to threat, to keep you safe, to keep you seen, and perhaps once that saved you. But now it's keeping you small, and the soul, unlike the ego, does not negotiate, it does not explain, it doesn't beg for attention, waits for resonance. It will wait years, decades even, for you to remember. And when it calls, it will do so not in words, but in longing. A subtle ache, a quiet discontent, a sacred restlessness that won't leave you alone. That restlessness isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a whisper from your soul saying, there is more life, more truth, more depth than your constructed self can handle. But to follow the soul requires you to disappoint your ego. And that's terrifying. Because the ego is attached to approval, and following the soul often looks like betrayal to those who expect you to stay the same. It may mean walking away from titles, from relationships, from certainty. It may mean becoming a beginner again, vulnerable, visible, alive. You'll be tempted to shrink, to delay, to call it bad timing. But the soul's timing is never bad. It's always precise. It shows up when you are spiritually ripe, even if mentally resistant. And in that tension between resistance and readiness, you are forged. So do not wait for the ego to get comfortable with the soul's instructions. That day may never come. Move anyway. Decide anyway. Begin anyway. And the moment you do, something subtle shifts. You realize the safety you thought you had was just a cage with nice wallpaper. You realize that the approval you chased was a poor substitute for belonging to yourself. In truth, the soul doesn't ask you to abandon the ego. It asks you to mature it, to teach it that it can rest now, that you are safe not because others applaud you, but because you finally approve of yourself. This is not a one-time awakening. It is a lifelong dialogue between who you thought you were and who you are becoming. And the more often you choose the soul over the ego, the clearer your path becomes. Not easier, but truer. 4. The language of pain. Pain is the soul's alarm system. But unlike the alarms of the world, this one does not wake you up by noise. It wakes you up by depth. When you ignore what your intuition has been whispering for months, pain speaks louder, not out of cruelty but insistence. You don't have pain because you're broken. You have pain because something inside you is still buried alive. A truth you've ignored, a calling you've silenced, a boundary you've betrayed. Pain is not dysfunct. Eon, it's disruption, sacred disruption. You've been told to numb it, entertain it, outrun it. But pain isn't something you escape, it's something you metabolize. And that process is uncomfortable because it requires honesty. Radical honesty. The kind of honesty that makes you sit in silence and admit to yourself what you've known for years but never dare to say aloud. And that's why most people stay stuck, not because healing is impossible, but because truth is inconvenient. Pain is no to the real problem, resistance to the message is. When pain knocks on the door, it brings a mirror. It shows you the cost of pretending. It reveals where your life has become a performance. It doesn't destroy, it reveals. And once revealed, it cannot be unseen. Emotional pain might come in the form of heartbreak, but its roots run deeper. It exposes your fear of abandonment, your craving to be chosen, your inability to sit with loneliness without filling it with distraction. It doesn't just say they left. It says you never fully chose yourself. Physical pain might show up as illness, but often it's a manifestation of emotional dissonance you've never given a voice to. The body keeps the score, as trauma researchers say, because it's the only part of you that can't lie. Existential pain is the most sacred of all. That sense that something is missing, even when everything looks fine. That ache that tells you you're living someone else's life. That persistent void is not depression, it's misalignment. And if you sit long enough with that ache, it begins to speak. It says, you're not here to survive routines, you're here to remember your aliveness. Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Pain brings you to that terrifying threshold, not to punish you, but to invite you across, to wholeness, to self-possession, to inner sovereignty. So when pain visits again, and it will, don't reach for the escape hatch. Stay. Ask it, what are you trying to show me? What am I avoiding? What would it mean if I listened? Because when you finally understand pain, not as an interruption but as initiation, it stops being a prison and becomes your path. 5. The revelation of the shadow. Your shadow is not your shame, it is your shield. It is the armor you forged in childhood to protect what was vulnerable, creative, and uncontrollable. But what protected you once now limits you. Because you don't need armor when you're no longer at war with yourself. Most people misunderstand shadow work. They think it's about excavating darkness. But darkness is not evil. It's unintegrated power. It's forgotten truth. It's the part of you that still thinks it must stay small to be loved. Think of the child who was told not to cry, so they became stoic. Or the girl told not to be loud, so she became agreeable. Or the boy taught to never fail, so he became perfectionist. The shadow is not weakness, it's adaptation. But those adaptations come at a cost. Authenticity. Every time you chose approval over truth, you fed the shadow. Every time you silenced your intuition to avoid conflict, you taught the shadow to speak in indirect ways, through projection, resentment, sabotage. Jung's work teaches us that wholeness is not the absence of shadow, it's the integration of it. To make the unconscious conscious is not to destroy it, but to reclaim it. Because what you exile, you become enslaved by, but what you embrace, you transform. And here's the deeper truth, your shadow holds the exact medicine you seek. The anger you suppress contains your lost boundaries. The fear you repress contains your latent wisdom. The envy you deny contains your buried desire for more. What you label as ugly might be the part of you that's most honest, most alive, most whole. But integration doesn't mean indulgence. It means awareness. It means saying, yes, I have rage, but I will transmute it into power. Yes, I have insecurity, but I will turn it into self-responsibility. The shadow only becomes dangerous when ignored, not when acknowledged. To live without shadow work is to live half alive. You'll feel split, inauthentic, out of place, even in your own success. Because the soul doesn't want a curated version of you, it wants all of you. And when you finally show up, shadow and all, something miraculous happens. You stop performing and people begin to feel you. You stop pretending and people begin to trust you. You stop hiding and the world begins to reflect back your wholeness. So the next time discomfort rises, don't exile it. Welcome it. Say, I see you, I won't run this time. Because until you own your shadow, someone else will, through conflict, chaos, or karma. 6. The sacrifice of safety. Safety is seductive. It whispers, stay here. It's predictable, even if here is unfulfilling. Even if it's slowly eroding your joy. Safety has nothing to do with truth and everything to do with familiarity. And familiarity is the drug of the ego. To leap, to grow, to evolve, you must renounce safety as your god. You must be willing to say goodbye to the identity that succeeded by pretending. You must let go of the version of you who survived by being a gria, BLE, silent, impressive, because what helped you adapt won't help you ascend. The soul asks for sacrifice, not suffering, but surrender. And that surrender often looks irrational. It looks like leaving the good job, like walking away from the one, like saying no to an opportunity that doesn't align even though it pays well. Because the soul doesn't measure value by money or titles, it measures value by resonance, by how alive something feels, by how much of yourself you must betray. Oh, keep it. Every great metamorphosis requires this reckoning. What are you willing to release, not because it's wrong, but because it's no longer true? When you finally let go, not in fear, but in faith, you enter the liminal space, the cocoon, the sacred void where the old you is no longer active and the new you is not yet formed. And this space feels terrifying. You will doubt, you will grieve, you will be tempted to return, but if you stay long enough, you will witness the rebirth. And here's the paradox. When you finally stop clinging to safety, you discover a deeper security, a groundedness not in outcomes but in integrity. You become safe to yourself, and in that safety, life becomes less about control and more about coherence. You don't need more motivation. You need more permission to let go, because the universe is not testing your strength. It's testing your willingness to stop betraying your truth in the name of security. And most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're too loyal to a life that no longer fits. They fear the ridicule that comes with radical change. They fear are being misunderstood or judged or alone. But solitude is not the absence of people. It is the presence of self. And in that presence, you will discover something more powerful than popularity, inner authority. True transformation doesn't happen when you're ready. It happens when you're real. So walk into the fire of change, not because you're fearless, but because you're finished with the lie of comfort. Burn the bridge to who you no longer are, the new world you're waiting for, Exi. So on the other side of your surrender. 7. The Mirror of Coherence. Coherence is the soul's native frequency. It's when the inner you and the outer you are finally the same. No mask, no gap, no compromise. Most people live in energetic contradiction. They want love but don't love themselves. They want truth but live in secrecy. They want abundance but operate in scarcity. And so their lives reflect fragmentation, not because they are unworthy, but because they are misaligned. The universe doesn't punish, it reflects. And its reflection is brutally honest. Coherence isn't perfection, it's consistency. It's choosing the same truth in both public and private. It's honoring your intuition even when logic screams. It's acting from clarity, not convenience. And this integrity ripples into everything. You speak differently, you walk differently, you attract differently, not because you're trying to manipulate energy, but because you've become energy that can no longer be manipulated. Incoherence leaks, it exhausts you. Oh, because pretending is heavy, hiding is noisy, and the more you strive to appear right, the more you lose the peace of being right with yourself. So the practice is simple but not easy. Tell the truth, feel what you feel, act in alignment even when it costs you comfort. This kind of congruence makes you magnetic, not in a social media way, but in a spiritual way. Your life starts to make sense. The right people appear, the right opportunities emerge, the right timing unfolds. Not by effort, but by energetic precision. Because coherence isn't an outcome, it's a home, a state of being where you no longer have to chase worth. You embody it. And in that embodiment, the universe doesn't need convincing. It responds, not to what you want, but to what you are. But here's what no one tells you. The path to coherence is a dismantling, a deconstruction of all the roles you played to be accepted. To become coherent, you must risk being rejected. To become coherent, you must set up negotiating with your inner knowing. It is the most dangerous liberation you'll ever allow, because it costs you your illusions. But what you get in return is priceless. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, love that doesn't depend on performance, and a path that doesn't depend on permission. You won't need to ask if you're doing it right. You'll feel it, not in applause, not in validation, but in the quiet resonance of truth, finally finding a home inside you. All this time, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. The universe was never asking, "Do you want it?" It was asking, "Can you hold it without losing yourself?" Transformation doesn't happen when you ask for it. It happens when you're no longer willing to live misaligned, when your truth becomes louder than your fear, when your actions match your essence, even when no one's watching. The chaos, the silence, the delays, they were not setbacks. They were sacred pauses, invitations to return to the version of you that doesn't chase change, but becomes it. So if everything feels uncertain, good. It means you're close, not to what you want, but to who you were always meant to be. Now step forward, not to prove anything, but to live in alignment with everything you've already become.